Pax vobiscum, and welcome back to the channel, and as well to another reading of Miyamoto Musashi's book, The Five Rings. Today we will continue reading this book by proceeding with Book 2, Water. The strategy of the Niten Ichi-ryu, two heavens, one style, is at its heart based on water. Putting into practice a method of achieving advantage, in these writings that I call the Scroll of Water, I record the handling of the sword in this style. In any case, it is difficult to explain the heart of this way in detail without somehow changing it. However, even though, as I say, words are not sufficient, you will understand the deep principles for yourself, as a matter of course. What is written here, each thing, you should reflect on word by word. If you think about it carelessly, there are many things in the way that are misunderstood. The principles of strategy I have written out here relate to one-on-one combat, but in order also to grasp the principles of a battle of 10,000 against 10,000, it is crucial to take a broad view. On this way of strategy, if you view the path incorrectly or stray from it, even a little, you will fall into bad ways. Just looking at these writings is not sufficient to realize the way of strategy. Take into your very self the things written here, not thinking of them as something to read or learn, or to imitate, but as principles you have discovered within your own heart, and thoroughly investigate and experiment with them daily. Mindset in strategy. In the way of strategy, your mindset should not differ from your everyday mind. In daily life or in strategic moments, without changing it even the slightest bit, make your mind broad and straight. Without trying to rein it in tightly or letting it go slack at all, and in such a way that does not lean in any particular direction, center your mind exactly and set it quietly vibrating. You should investigate this exhaustively, until you sustain this vibration constantly, and not allow it to cease even for a split second. At quiet times your mind should not become quiet, and for some reason you are hurried, your mind should not become a little rushed. Your mindset should not be affected by your body, nor your body by your mind. Pay close attention to the state of your mind, and do not worry about your body. Fill any places where your mind is lacking, but do not allow it to become overfull at all. While relaxing the surface of your mind, make its depth strong, not allowing others to discern your mindset. Understand thoroughly how a small body can be large in spirit, and know completely how a large body can be small in spirit. Whether large or small, set your mind straight. Having a mind that is not controlled by your body is essential. Do not allow your mind to become clouded, but make it expansive. And in this broadness you should place your wisdom. It is of the utmost importance to polish both your wisdom and your mindset devoutly. Honing your wisdom, you will recognize what is right and wrong in any situation, and understand the good and bad of everything, knowing every art and skill, and being familiar with every way. When you have achieved a condition where you cannot be tricked by anyone in the world in the tiniest way, that is the wisdom at the heart of strategy. In the wisdom of the way of strategy, there is something unlike anything else. You must investigate this thoroughly, refining the principles of the way of strategy until in battle, when everything else is in chaos, your mind is unshakable. Comportment in strategy. As for holding the body, the face should be tilted neither up nor down. It should not be scowling, and the eyes should not bulge out. Do not wrinkle your forehead, but set a crease between the brows so that you do not blink or move your eyeballs. Narrow your eyes a little, and soften your gaze placidly. The line of the nose should be straight, with a slight feeling of sticking out the chin. Straighten the sinews at the back of the neck, putting a feeling of energy into the hairline there. Thinking of the body from the shoulders down as being all of a piece, Lower your shoulders and make your back straight without letting your buttocks stick out. Extend your energy down from your knees to the tips of your feet. So that you do not stoop over at the waist, expand your abdomen, thrusting it forward somewhat. There is the teaching called tightening the wedge. Set your belly against the scabbard of your short sword so that your belt does not slacken. This is tightening the wedge. All in all, regarding your physical carriage and strategy, it is vital to make your normal, everyday posture your strategic posture, and make your strategic stance your usual stance. You must investigate this thoroughly. Setting the gaze and strategy. In setting the gaze, make it large and set it broadly. There are two kinds of gaze, perceiving and looking. The gaze that perceives is strong. The gaze that looks is weak. To see faraway things as if they were close, and to see things that are close as though they were far away, is key in strategy. To understand your opponent's sword, but not to look at it at all, it can be said that this too is extremely important in strategy. This takes serious practice. This setting of the gaze in small-scale strategy and in large is the same. Without moving your eye, see both of your flanks. This is crucial. Things of this sort are very hard to figure out all at once under pressure. Learn what is written here, and make this your main everyday way of seeing. You should carefully refine this until your gaze does not change in any situation. Grasping the sword. When taking up the sword, hold it with a floating feeling in your thumb and first finger, the middle finger neither tight nor loose, and grasp it with the feeling of tightening the ring and little fingers. A loose feeling in the grip is bad. You should take up the sword thinking of it as a thing for cutting down your opponent. When you cut down your adversary, your grasp does not change. Hold it in such a way that your hand does not become frozen. Although there are times when you also block, parry, hit, or press down your adversary's sword, only alter your thumb and index finger, and even then with the feeling of only changing slightly. In any case, you must hold the sword with the intention of cutting. The grip used when test cutting and the grip used when cutting in combat is the same person-cutting grip. It does not change. Overall, whether with respect to the sword or your hand, you should dislike a feeling of it being settled in one place or position. A settled hand is a dead hand. One that does not become settled is a living hand. This is a thing you need to take to heart thoroughly. Using the feet. As for moving the feet, floating the tips of the toes slightly, you should tread firmly on your heels. Although depending on circumstances there are large, small, slow or fast strides, the feet should be used just as when walking normally. Flying feet, floating feet, creeping feet, these three types of footwork are to be avoided. Regarding our way, it is very important to say this. What is called the yin-yang footwork is absolutely essential. In yin-yang footwork, there is no moving of just one foot. When cutting, when retreating, or when advancing, just as yin and yang alternate, the feet tread right, left, right, left. There shouldn't be any repeatedly stepping with the same foot. This is something that needs to be examined closely. The 5 positions. The 5 orientations of position are raised, middle, lowered, to the right side and to the left side. These are the 5 orientations. Even divided into 5 types, the positions are all for the purpose of cutting a person down. Beyond these 5 positions, there are no others. In taking any position, do not think of taking up a position. You should think only of cutting. Taking a large or smaller stance will depend on the situation and should follow from principle. The raised, middle, and lowered positions are solid positions. Those to the sides are fluid positions. The right and left positions are for circumstances such as where one is blocked in from above or blocked at one side. The right and left are decided according to location. In this way, it is especially important for you to understand that the middle is the ultimate position. The middle is the original meaning of position. Look at large-scale strategy. The middle position is the general seat. The other 4 positions follow the general's orders. Investigate this diligently. The path of the sword. To speak of understanding the path of the long sword that we usually wear, even when swung with 2 fingers, if you understand the path of the sword well, it can be wielded freely. If you try to swing the long sword quickly, it goes against the natural movement of the sword, and is difficult to swing. In order to wield it well, the sword should be swung with a feeling of moving it calmly. If you try to use it like a fan or like a dagger, intending to move it quickly, this goes against the natural movement of the sword and makes it hard to wield. This is called dagger chopping, and you cannot cut a person down with a sword in this way. When you strike downwards with the sword, raise it up in a path it takes easily, and when you swing it horizontally, return it horizontally in its natural path, always broadly extending your elbows and swinging powerfully. This is the natural path of the sword. If you use, and by using learn, the 5 standard forms, you will establish the natural path of the sword and be able to wield it easily. You should train diligently. The progression of 5 standard forms. The first form. The position for the first form is the middle height, directing the tips of your swords to the opponent's face. As you and your adversary approach each other, when the opponent cuts at your long sword, slip to the right and ride the adversary's sword with your long sword. When the opponent tries to cut again, turn the tips of your swords and cut down at him, leaving your swords lowered just as they are at the end of the downwards cut. Then, when again the adversary strikes, strike his hands from below. This is the first form. As a rule, you cannot comprehend these 5 forms just on the basis of what is written here. To understand these 5 forms, take the swords in your hands and practice their natural path. With the path of the swords found in these forms, no matter what sword technique your opponent strikes with, you will understand it. As for the positions of the 2 swords, apart from the 5, there are no others, it should be noted here. You must forge your skills through discipline. The second form. The swords in the second form are in the raised position. From here, cut down at the adversary once, just as he is about to strike. If you miss your opponent, leave your swords lowered just as they are, and when the enemy strikes again, strike him by scooping up from below. If he strikes again, do the same thing. Within these techniques there can be a wide variety of feeling and rhythm. But if, applying what is found within these techniques, you train in this style and come to understand the 5 paths of the sword very precisely, you will have victory in any situation. You must practice. The third form. For the position in the third form, hold the swords in the lowered position with the feeling of letting them hang there. At the moment your adversary goes to strike, hit at his hands from below. When the opponent attempts to strike down your swords as they hit at his hands, come up over his sword in a forestalling rhythm after he has swung, with the intent of cutting laterally across his upper arms. With the lowered position, it is all about striking and stopping the enemy's strike all at once, just as he strikes. The lowered position is often employed when following the way of swordsmanship, both in times when you move fast and when you move slowly. Taking up the swords, you must train with discipline. The fourth form. For the position of the fourth form, take a position with the swords to the left side. You should hit the opponent's hands from below as he goes to strike. If the adversary tries to knock down your rising attack, with the feeling of striking his hands, parry the path of his sword in the same way, and cut upwards at an angle with the long sword to above your own shoulder height. This is the natural path of the sword. When the attacker comes to strike, understanding the path of the opponent's long sword is the way to victory. You should test this thoroughly. The fifth form. For the fifth form, take a position with the swords sideways to your right side. When you realize that your opponent is taking up a stance to attack, swing the longsword up at an angle from the lower side to the raised position, then directly cut from above. This form is also to familiarize the student with the natural path of the swords. If using this technique you become accustomed to swinging the swords, you will then be able to wield even a heavy sword freely. It is impossible to write out these 5 forms in detail. The aim of this style is basically to understand the natural path of the sword, and also to learn the general rhythms of combat, and become able to perceive the opponent's sword. First of all, using these 5 techniques, train your hands unceasingly. Also, when in combat with an opponent, understand the path of the sword, read your adversary's mindset, and, using various rhythms, attain victory in any way. You must analyze this well. The teaching of position, no position. As for what is called position, no position, it means that there shouldn't be such a thing as taking a position with swords. However, since they can be placed in 5 orientations, there should also be 5 positions. But according to the adversary's approach, according to the place and following the circumstances, whatever position you place the swords in, they are always held with the intention of being able to cut down the opponent easily. The raised position, depending on the occasion, may have the feeling of being lowered somewhat and become a middle position. The middle position, too, in accordance with principle, may be moved up a little and become a raised position. The lowered position as well, from time to time, if raised a little, becomes a middle position. The positions of both sides, if moved a little toward the center, based on conditions, basically become middle and lowered positions. Accordingly, there is the principle that positions both exist and do not exist. Above all, when taking up the swords, no matter how you hold them, it is with the intention of cutting down your opponent. Even though there are things like parrying, blocking, hitting, sticking to or touching the opponent's sword, and so forth, you must understand that they are all for the purpose of cutting down the adversary. Think to parry, think to block, think to hit or to stick, or to touch, and as a result your cutting will be insufficient. To think of everything as a chance to cut your opponent down is crucial. Investigate this thoroughly. In large-scale strategy with numerous people, there are also positions. There too they are all a means of winning the battle. In any situation, to become settled or fixed is bad. Work this out diligently. Striking the opponent in one beat. In the rhythms of striking an opponent, there is what is called one beat. You grasp that you and your adversary are each in a position to hit the other, understand the moment when the opponent cannot react, and strike without moving your body and without attaching your mind to anything. This is an exceedingly quick and direct rhythm of striking. The rhythm of hitting before the opponent can think to pull back his sword, move it out of the way, or strike, this is called one beat. Learn this rhythm well and acquire it, and train to strike quickly in the beat of an interval. The rhythm of 2 advances. The rhythm of 2 advances. When you go to strike and your opponent quickly pulls back or moves to block, you feign a strike. Then when the adversary tries to parry or pull back again, strike him there. This is the rhythm of 2 advances. Just by reading what is written here, it will be extremely difficult to grasp how to strike like this. However, if you are taught well, you will come to understand it very quickly. Striking with no thought, no form. When your adversary is about to strike, and you also want to strike, with your body becoming the body of the strike and your spirit becoming the spirit of striking, your hand spontaneously strikes out of nowhere, quickly and powerfully. This, called no thought, no form, is a strike of paramount importance. This strike is a frequently used one, Learn it well, and train in it diligently. Flowing water striking. In what is called flowing water striking, when you close with the enemy and your adversary tries to pull back quickly or disengage, or when he suddenly tries to knock your long sword aside, you expand both your body and your spirit, and with your long sword following after your body, very smoothly like water that has been dammed up running over, strike broadly and powerfully. Once you learn and understand this strike, it becomes a very easy way to strike indeed. It is vital to discern the bearing of your opponent. The opportune hit. When you strike and your opponent tries to parry your attack or knock it aside, strike at his head, hands, legs all in one stroke, and in the path of your long sword strike anywhere. This is the opportune strike. Practice and learn this strike well. It is a strike that can be employed at any time. To understand the fine points, you need to use this technique when you actually fight and analyze it. The flint and spark blow. The flint and spark blow. Your adversary's long sword and your own are close enough to touch, and without raising your sword even a little, you strike very powerfully. This is done powerfully with the legs, powerfully with the body, and powerfully with the arms. You should strike quickly with all three of these together. Unless you practice this strike many times, it is hard to do, but if you train well, you will be able to strike very hard with it. Autumn leaves striking. In autumn leaves striking, you knock down the enemy's sword and take it away. When your opponent takes up a position in front of you and tries to strike, block or parry. If you strike his longsword strongly in the spirit of either the no thought, no form, or flint and spark blow, and then immediately strike it again with a feeling of knocking it away, continuing your strike until your own sword tip points down, your opponent's sword will definitely fall. This strike, if you train well, will make it easy to knock your adversary's sword from his hand. You should practice this thoroughly. The body replaces the sword. This could be called the sword replaces the body. Generally, when striking an opponent, the sword and the body do not strike at the same time. When the enemy comes within striking range, go in first with your body as if to strike with it, and then the sword then strikes necessarily without regard for the body. There are certain circumstances where the long sword strikes first without the body moving, but on a whole the body moves in first and the sword strike afterwards. You should investigate this deeply as you practice your striking. On striking and hitting. What is called striking and what is called hitting are two different things. The spirit of striking, no matter which type of strike is used, is that it is done with great resolution and certainty. As for hitting, if you go in with the intention of just hitting anything, even if you hit incredibly strongly and your opponent dies immediately, this is still hitting. A strike is performed with intent. You should investigate this. Whether you hit your adversary's arm or leg, in any case it is only still hitting. It only serves the purpose of allowing you to execute a strong strike afterwards. Hitting has the sense of being like touching. If you practice well, you will be able to distinguish the two. You should work this out. The body of the autumn monkey. The body of the autumn monkey is about the feeling of not overextending the arms. When entering the opponent's space, with the feeling of not reaching out with your hands even a little, be intent on quickly getting your body in before you strike your adversary. If you think to reach out with your hands, your body will certainly stay far back, so you'll need to focus on quickly getting close with your body. If you are at a distance where you can engage with your hands, you can easily get your body in. Test this out fully. The lacquer glue body. Lacquer glue means when you get your body in and stick very tightly, intending not to separate. When you get right up next to your opponent's body, press in with your face, press with your body, and press with your legs very strongly. Everyone tends to get in quickly with their face and feet, but leaves their body back. Stick your body to your opponent's body tightly, so as not to allow even the slightest space between your bodies. This is something that needs to be investigated well. Comparing heights. And speaking of comparing heights, this is how any time you get in close with your opponent, you do not allow your body to shrink. You extend your legs, extend your torso, extend your neck and close in powerfully, getting your face right up next to your adversaries. Think of it like you are comparing heights and proving that you are the taller. It is crucial to extend yourself to your full height and move in strongly. You should work on this extensively. To become sticky. When the enemy attempts to strike, and you also go to strike with your long sword, and the enemy intercepts it, apply your sword to your opponents with a feeling of stickiness as you move in. Stickiness is just a feeling of making it hard for the adversary's sword to get away, but don't try to put too much strength into it. If you engage the enemy's sword and apply stickiness when you close in, you can do so as calmly as you please without difficulty. There is what is called stickiness and there is what is called entanglement. Stickiness is strong, entanglement is weak. You need to differentiate between these things. The body hit. A body hit is when you get up next to your opponent and strike him with your body. You turn your face a little to the side, stick out your left shoulder, and hit your opponent in the chest. The hit is done as hard as possible, and it is done suddenly with a feeling of him bouncing away. If you learn how to get inside like this, it is strong enough that you can knock your adversary back 2 or 3 ken. It is also possible to hit the enemy hard enough to kill him. You should train in this well. 3 parries. I talk about 3 parries. At the time you close in on your opponent and he strikes out with his longsword, to intercept it, make it as if you were going to stab him in the eye with your longsword, and deflect his sword by pulling it past your right shoulder, parrying it in this way. Next, in what I call the thrusting parry, receive your opponent's sword by stabbing at his right eye, with a feeling of scissoring his neck as you thrust at him. Or when your adversary strikes, get inside his strike with your short sword, without particularly worrying about his sword, moving in and trying to thrust your left hand into his face. These are the 3 parries. Think of them like you are clenching your left hand into a fist and punching your opponent in the face with it. This is something that you should train in very thoroughly. Stabbing the face. This is what is meant by stabbing the face. When you face your adversary, in between his sword blows and yours, it is essential that you constantly remember to keep the feeling of stabbing him in the face with the tip of your sword. If you have the mindset of stabbing your opponent in the face, he will try to get both his face and his body out of the way, and when he tries to get away, you benefit from a variety of opportunities for victory. You need to work this out well. During battle, if the enemy's mind is on getting his body out of the way, you have already won. For this reason, you should never forget what I call stabbing the face. Whenever you are practicing strategy, you should exercise this principle and train in it. Stabbing the heart. As for what is called stabbing the heart, when in the midst of battle you are constrained, such as from above or at the side, so it is difficult for you to cut in any way, you should thrust into your opponent. With a feeling of slipping the blow of his sword, show the back edge of your longsword straight to your adversary and, pulling it back without allowing the tip to twist, thrust it into your opponent's chest. You can also get by using this technique alone, at times as such when you are very tired, or when your sword has become unable to cut. You need to discern this properly. Katsu Totsu. As for Katsu Totsu, Whenever you go to strike your adversary, when you move in to strike and your opponent tries to strike back at you, raise your sword as if from below, as if to stab the enemy with it, and turning it, strike coming back down. With an extremely fast rhythm, strike. Katsu Totsu. That feeling is that when you raise it up with Katsu, and then strike with Totsu. This rhythm should be used whenever exchanging strikes. The way to do Katsu Totsu is to go in with the feeling of raising the tip of your sword, as if thinking to stab the opponent, and in the same beat as raising it, strike. You should test this out through extensive practice. Slapping deflection. The slapping deflection is when you are exchanging blows with your adversary, and it falls into a regular back and forth, toten rhythm. You meet one of your opponent's blows by striking and slapping your longsword against his. The feeling of this should not be of slapping very hard, neither is it blocking. Anticipate the enemy's sword, swat it aside, and immediately strike your opponent. By slapping, take the initiative, and by striking, take the initiative. This is the crucial point. If you time the slap well, no matter how hard your adversary strikes, with a feeling of swatting it just a little, your sword point will not be knocked down. You should learn this well and test it. The bearing for many opponents. The bearing for many opponents is what we call it when one person fights against a large group. Drawing both your katana and wakizashi, take a position with the swords out broadly to the left and right. Whichever of the 4 directions opponents attack from, your aim is to chase them around in one direction. Determine the order in which your adversaries are preparing to attack, and quickly go to meet whichever one advances first, keeping your field of vision broad, and when you grasp that an enemy is about to strike, swing both the right and left swords in opposite directions at once. Waiting is bad. Quickly return to a stance with the swords positioned at both sides, and move in, cutting powerfully where an adversary advances, and crush him. Just like that, when again the enemy advances, attack in that direction and cut him apart. That's the idea. As much as possible, get your adversaries in one line, and chase them around as if they were a school of fish. If you see that they are piled up immediately, without allowing a pause, cut into them powerfully. If, when your enemies advance, you just keep chasing them around and around as a group, it is very hard to get anywhere. On the other hand, if you keep thinking about which direction each enemy is going to come from next, this is a mindset of waiting and won't get you anywhere either. Perceive your adversary's rhythms and understand where they fall apart, and you will win. If occasionally you get a large group of training partners together, engage with them, and grasp the heart of this. You will feel at ease whether you are against one opponent, 10, or 20. You should practice this well and investigate it. The principles of combat. As for these principles of combat, they are a way of understanding how to use strategy to achieve victory using the sword. They are not to be written about in detail. You have to learn to win by way of thorough practice. Basically, the true way of all strategy is revealed through the sword. Just one strike. This one strike, as it is called, if you have the spirit of it, you are certain to gain victory. It is very difficult to get this without learning strategy thoroughly. If you train diligently in this skill, you will get to the heart of strategy itself, and in this way be able to win at will. You must practice constantly. Direct transmission. The heart of direct transmission is in receiving the true way of the Nito Ichi-ryu, 2 swords, 1 style, and passing it on. To train ever diligently and to embody this strategy is vital. What I have written above in this scroll is to record my style of sword technique in a very general way for the future. As for strategy, in order to learn how to make swords and achieve victory over people. First, through the 5 standard forms, understand the 5 orientations of position, and learn the natural path of the sword. Your whole body will become pliable, your mind become very effective, and you will understand the rhythms of the way. Both you yourself and your sword technique will become sharp and clear. When your body and legs become able to move freely just as you wish, you will beat one person, beat 2 people, and you will come to understand what is good and bad in strategy. Practice what is in this writing point by point, and engage in combat with various opponents, gradually acquiring the principles of the way. Set your mind to this ceaselessly, without being in a rush. Whenever you have a chance, put your hand to the sword and learn its virtues. Engage in combat with anyone and everyone, and learn their mindsets. Even a path of 1,000 ri is walked one step at a time. Do not hurry, but carry out this practice steadily, remembering that it is the duty of a warrior. Thinking, today I will defeat who I was yesterday, tomorrow I will defeat the less skilled, and after that I will defeat the more skilled. Do as directed in these writings and resolve not to allow your heart to be sidetracked. No matter how many adversaries you may overcome, to turn your back on your training is not the true way. When the fundamental principles appear in your mind, you will understand the mindset that allows you to overcome tens of opponents alone. Having achieved that, you will realize strategy on both the large and small scale. Forge yourself with 1,000 days of training, and polish yourself with 10,000 days of practice. This is something you need to investigate thoroughly. And so there we have the book, or scroll, or ring as the case may be, 2, called Water. I thought this book was rather interesting. It really sort of gives us an insight into the concepts of the art of swordsmanship from the time of that Musashi lived in. So from a historical standpoint, I find this scroll to be particularly, I cannot speak. I found it to be interesting. There we go. I found it to be quite interesting in that respect. And then another thing that I really liked was his, how throughout the scroll, almost after every paragraph or every section, he would say, you should investigate this thoroughly. You should practice this thoroughly. And then in that last portion there, talking about 1,000, days of thought, 10,000 days of practice, the concept of practicing over and over and over again to develop the skill, the fact that you would not receive the skill or understand the art of swordsmanship just by reading. And his comment too, that he wrote everything down in a general sense, but with the intent that it should be preserved for the future, but with the understanding that they are general, even for lack of a better term, rules, but general information for the reader to look over and understand that he can read, that is the reader can read and not really understand. The reader can read and practice and still not quite understand what Musashi is talking about, unless with that reading and with that practice is consistent. It becomes habit. There is constant practice. It's not just you learn a skill and then that's it. It's you learn the skill, you learn about strategy, and the whole point of strategy is that you never stop learning, is sort of what I gathered from this scroll. And there are notes here and there in this scroll where the translator, the translator of Musashi's work in this edition, swordsmanship is flanked by the word oral tradition, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I think that sort of relates to us now, as I think it relates to really any portion of humanity, in the sense of the concept of practice, the concept of building habits, the concept of not looking for a quick release or a quick buck in this case, or quick knowledge, but the concept of mastery, the concept of wanting to learn something, of wanting to become better, of wanting to achieve something greater, in this case, achieve a form of swordsmanship that allows one's mind and body to be flexible and open and yet focused in order to win in battle and win in a fight against 1 or 10, as Musashi frequently says. And we can see the importance of that today, I think. There is something to be said so rewarding about really applying yourself to something, putting in the work, repeatedly practicing, repeatedly trying to do what you can to further your abilities. And it's not just something, on the mental plane or physical plane. Everything is connected. And that is something that we sort of see in Musashi's discussion in the scroll or book of ground. And it sort of really comes to play here in the scroll book of water. The concept of, you can have the information before you, but it is really up to you. You and the time and the work that you put in, that is what makes the flower grow. That is what makes it bloom. That is what gives you the ability to conquer your foes, to gain discipline, to gain skill, the ability to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to practice, and I'm going to do it consistently. So I thought that was very interesting, and again, a very good lesson today as well as any other time, but especially today, I think. At times I feel that we sort of forget the reward, the satisfaction that one has from repeated practice and building something into a habit versus the concept of quick consumption or quick results. You can sometimes get those quick results or quick action, but it's very thin. There's nothing tangible about it. But when you really take something and work hard for it and build it into not just a skill, but it becomes a part of your very being, I think that is a great power that humans possess, and I think is sometimes not discussed enough. But even Musashi back in the day, I think in this scroll especially, it sort of shows this concept of his school style, in that he understood this, and that I think is what he's trying to get across, at least in my interpretation of sort of what I'm getting from his own words. I believe that is what he is trying to convey to students, to readers of his works, is that, you can have some starting points, but it is really you who must put in the work to make this knowledge actually come to anything. So again, very interesting scroll, the scroll of water. It made me think of the way of water, if you will. But a very enjoyable read, not as long as ground, but I think very, very relevant to all of us. With that being said, we will end the video here, and next video we will continue with the Scroll of Fire. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to continuing our discussion and reading of The Five Brings by Miyamoto Musashi. Have a pleasant day, everyone. Goodbye.